What if I told you that one of Hollywood's most famous stars is quietly getting ready for a huge comeback? Sounds crazy, right? But it's true. And yes, we're talking about Johnny Depp. If you've been following everything that's happened with him over the past few years, then you already know it hasn't been easy. Honestly, it's been like a wild ride at an amusement park. And if you've been keeping up with the story, you're definitely not the only one. Millions of people all around the world have been watching, talking, arguing, and making up their own minds about everything he's been through. But now, something new is going on. Something that not many people thought would happen, at least not this soon. There are quiet whispers coming out of Hollywood, and those whispers are all pointing toward one thing. Johnny Depp is going for a big comeback in early 2026, not just a small return, not just a random show-up. We're talking about a comeback that could totally change how people feel about him again. And that brings up a lot of questions. What's really going on behind the scenes? Is Hollywood actually ready to bring him back? And maybe the biggest question of all, are fans ready to welcome him back? Let's take a step back for a second and really understand how we got here. There was a time when Johnny Depp was everywhere. And I mean everywhere. It didn't matter if you only watched a few movies or watched everything that came out. You couldn't miss him. He wasn't just acting in movies, he was making them special. His acting was different, one of a kind, sometimes even a little weird. But that's exactly what made people love him. He didn't follow the normal rules of acting. He made his own style. Whether it was a funny character, a mysterious guy, or someone totally unpredictable, he always brought something fresh to the screen. People didn't just watch his movies. They remembered them. And for years, it felt like he could do nothing wrong. But then things changed. The very public court battle with Amber Heard turned his whole life upside down. And this wasn't just another celebrity drama that goes away after a few weeks. This was intense. It was everywhere. News channels, social media, talks between friends. Everyone had something to say about it. And when something gets that public, that out there, it starts to affect everything. Not just his reputation, but his work too. Movie studios started getting nervous. And from a money standpoint, that makes sense. Big movies cost a ton of money. And when there's a lot of drama around a big actor, studios like to play it safe. So slowly things started falling apart. Projects that once seemed like sure things were no longer happening. Roles that could have made the next part of his career great just disappeared. And just like that, one of Hollywood's biggest stars found himself stepping away from the spotlight. For a lot of people watching from the outside, it felt fast, almost unbelievable. How does someone go from being at the very top to being pushed out? But here's where the story gets interesting. Because instead of trying to quickly fight his way back into the big movies, instead of saying yes to every job just to stay in the news, Johnny Depp made a very different choice. He stepped away, and not just from the cameras, but on purpose. He moved away from the big Hollywood system and started working on smaller, more personal projects. These weren't movies made to crush it at the box office. They weren't built around giant ad campaigns. They were quieter, more focused, more about the love of acting instead of the business side of movies. And at first, some people didn't really get that move. Why step back when your career is already having a hard time? Why not do everything you can to stay in the spotlight? But when you really think about it, that choice might have been one of the smartest things he could have done. Because while he stayed out of the constant spotlight, something else started happening in the background. The noise started to quiet down. And when the noise quiets down, people start thinking more clearly. What people thought about him, which was once really split and emotional, slowly started to change. Conversations became less about reacting and more about thinking. People started looking back at what had happened, looking at different sides, asking new questions, and little by little the mood started to shift. Fans who had always had his back got louder. Others who weren't sure started leaning toward him again. Social media, which once felt really negative, started to feel more balanced. And over time, something important happened. The story started to change. Now, this didn't happen overnight. There was no one moment where everything suddenly flipped. It was slow, gradual, almost hard to see at first. But if you were paying attention, you could see it happening. And that brings us to where we are right now. Early 2026 is getting close. And with it, a new part of this story is starting to take shape. There are more and more reports coming from inside the movie world. Conversations happening behind closed doors, talks that don't always make the news, but still mean something. And all of them seem to point in the same direction. Johnny Depp is being thought about again, not just for small roles and not just for indie films, but for bigger chances, major studio movies. And that's a big deal because getting back into that world isn't easy. It takes more than just being a good actor. It takes the right timing, people rooting for you, confidence from the studios, and the right project at the right moment. And somehow, all of those pieces are starting to come together. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. Some of the rumored roles being connected to his name are not small. These are the kinds of roles that have the power to totally rebuild a career. The kinds of roles that remind fans why they loved an actor in the first place. And if even one of those projects actually happens, it could change everything. Because in Hollywood, what people think can change really fast. One strong performance, one hit movie, one powerful moment on screen. That's sometimes all it takes. And suddenly the conversation changes again from what happened to him to, he's back. And that's the power of a comeback. But let's talk about something that doesn't get talked about enough. Hollywood doesn't just let comebacks happen. It goes crazy for them. There's something about a comeback story that people connect with on a deeper level. It's not just about winning. It's about struggling, about falling down and getting back up again. It feels real. It feels human. And in a lot of ways, it makes the person easier to relate to than ever before. Johnny Depp's story fits that almost perfectly. He's not just coming back as a successful actor. He's coming back as someone who has been through really public highs and lows. Someone who has faced criticism, pressure, and really hard times, and is now trying to rebuild. And that adds a whole new level to his story. But here's another important detail. This comeback, if it happens, isn't being rushed. And that's really important because one of the biggest mistakes actors can make after a tough time is trying to do too much too fast, taking every role, showing up everywhere, trying to prove something all at once. But from what people inside Hollywood are saying, Johnny Depp is doing the opposite. He's being picky, careful, patient. He's picking projects based on how good they are, not just how much they'll get people talking. And that kind of thinking can make a huge difference, because when you come back with the right project, something that means something, something powerful, it hits harder. It doesn't just remind people of who you were. It shows them who you are now. And that's a very different thing. There are also growing rumors that early 2026 might bring more than just movie news. We could see interviews, public appearances, maybe even long sit-down conversations where he talks directly about his journey, his time away, and his plans going forward. And if that happens, it will add even more to his comeback story. Because people don't just want to see the actor. They want to get to know the person, they want to hear his side, they want to feel connected. And that connection plays a really big part in how a comeback is seen. Now, let's be real for a second. Nothing in Hollywood is for sure. Even the strongest comeback tries can run into problems. What people think can flip again. Projects can change. Plans can fall apart. That's just how the movie business works. But at the same time, momentum matters. And right now, there is momentum building around Johnny Depp. Again, there's curiosity, there's talk, there's excitement, and those are the early signs of something bigger. People are paying attention again. They're asking questions. They're watching closely to see what happens next. And maybe that's the most important part of all, because before any comeback becomes real, it starts with people caring. And right now, that caring is growing. So now it really comes down to you. What do you think about all of this? Do you think Johnny Depp deserves a full Hollywood comeback? Do you think fans are ready to fully welcome him back again? Or do you feel like things should stay the way they are right now? It's not a simple question. And honestly, there's no one right answer. Everyone sees it differently. Some people think about the past, others think about right now, and some are more interested in what might happen next. But one thing is for sure, this story isn't over. Not even close. In fact, it feels like it's just starting a brand new chapter. And if the rumors turn out to be true, early 2026 might be the moment when everything changes,